Let's take a look at a few parts in the story that really define or show us what we've been talking about. So young Goodman Brown figures out or understands that Faith is actually torn. If we take a look at an early line, he says, "Amen," cried Goodman Brown. "Say thy prayers, dear Faith, and go to bed at dusk, and no harm will come to thee." Well, what harm is he talking about? He knows that he's going on this journey of potential sexual infidelity and so on. So if you go to bed at dusk, well, there's no chance for you to get involved in that secretive nightlife when so much infidelity occurs. And we can see the fear here in young Goodman Brown. So early on, we're getting bits of foreshadowing for the potential that Faith is indeed just like her husband as far as the things that she's susceptible to. She's not perfect, neither is he, because they're both human. It's not far after that we hear Goodman Brown saying, "Poor little Faith, she talks of dreams. Methought as she spoke there was trouble in her face, as if a dream had warned her what work is to be done tonight. But no, 'twould kill her to think it. Well, she's a blessed angel on earth, and after this one night I'll cling to her skirts and follow her to heaven." Well, we see this line again as the husband going off for one last fling. And it's completely, could be looked upon as being sexual. You know, the forest representing the place where such a tryst may occur. And yet Goodman Brown continues to go on, and he's not doing all of this completely willingly. His conscience is fighting here. We take a look a little later. It says, young Goodman Brown heard the tramp of horses along the road and deemed it advisable to conceal himself within the verge of the forest, conscious of the guilty purpose that had brought him thither, though now so happily turned from it. So we can see his conscience trying to work here, trying to say, no, don't do this. It's not right. Young Goodman Brown continues, and finally when he is at the Black Mass, Faith is there. And one of the key lines in the entire story, he cries out, "Faith, Faith, look up to heaven and resist the wicked one." So resist that temptation completely. And then of course he wakes up, he says, turning the corner by the meeting house, he spied the head of Faith, with the pink ribbons, gazing anxiously forth and bursting into such joy at the sight of him as she skipped along the street and almost kissed her husband before the whole village. But Goodman Brown looked sternly and sadly into her face and passed on without a greeting. So we can see this struggle that he's dealing with here, that at one point she was the angel, and now once he realizes that she's subject to the same passions that he is, he doesn't like that very much. And of course the entire story on a surface level is dealing with this witch meeting. And on the last page, the key line that Hawthorne's telling us says, had Goodman Brown fallen asleep in the forest and only dreamed a wild dream of a witch meeting. The point is, it doesn't really matter if it was real or not. Young Goodman Brown has changed, and he doesn't really trust anyone. So we look very clearly and see that when characters undergo such a change, especially if we're looking at it from a maturity standpoint, we could say that this is a maturation story or possibly a coming-of-age story. And in this case, young Goodman Brown's not really able to deal with it. He remains repressed. He remains frightened by all of this and ends up living a fairly unhappy existence. So we can look at sexual repression as something that prevents people from being able to move forward, which is another Gothic convention that we find, and that's the mental grotesque. And in this case, it's arguable that we're dealing with Peter Pan syndrome, this inability to grow up. The body grows, but the mind remains in one place, in a childlike spot. So that has us scratching the surface of young Goodman Brown. The response questions and discussion board prompts will have us digging a bit deeper and exploring some of the other elements that we find in the genre.